All right, what's up, guys and girls? How's it going? This video will be covering the 4.3.3 patch notes. They're not very long. I'm going to dive into them really quickly, and then we're also going to go into discussion on the different racial passives for stamina builds. I'll make another video for Magicka, but I wanted to discuss stamina because I think it's maybe a little bit more interesting. Anyway, let's dive into it. So 4.3.3. Halls of Fabrication, Dungeons, yada, yada, yada. Already read through these, so we're just going to get to the stuff. Fix an issue where some pets were not inheriting their owner's conditional bonuses, such as the Necropotence item set. And then this, Yo Dog, we heard you didn't like procs, so we made sure your procs can't proc more procs. The champion point passives resilient to critical each will now be considered proc abilities, meaning it can't proc other proc abilities, such as item sets or enchants. So, I think it's resilient. Resilient is the one that when you take critical damage, you heal for X amount. I'm pretty sure it's that one. If you have points into that tree, it can proc Earthgore. And so, just as an example, since I've already talked about Earthgore on my channel, so you don't have to even get a heal in order to take some proc sets. So that's obviously not supposed to work that way, definitely not supposed to work that way. So that's what this is saying. There are obviously other proc sets and other conditions. So this shouldn't, the CP system should not proc sets, essentially. Dog. The heal from Siphoning Strikes and Morphs will no longer be considered proc abilities. Sorry, I had to say Yo Dog in the most obnoxious way possible because that's how I imagine they said it when they wrote it. So if you guys didn't like it, please know I was saying it with as much irony as possible. So, yeah. The heal from Siphoning Strikes and Morphs will no longer be considered proc abilities, meaning it can proc other proc abilities such as item sets and enchants. Okay, we will continue evaluating which abilities should and should not be considered procs in the future. Sounds good. Fix an issue with Annulment its Morphs and Conjure Word its Morphs where you could occasionally get stuck in the casting animations when using abilities in quick succession with other abilities such as Block. Thank you. That's awesome. Champion points. I didn't cover this last time. I'll talk about it a little bit now. 20% bonus will now actually work on all the intended areas of flat stat increases such as consumables, 5-piece bonuses, and passives. So they posted in the 4.3.2 patch notes that the 20% wasn't taking into account 5-piece bonuses and other things. And so what that means is essentially, I'm going to make this as non-mathy as possible, guys. But it wasn't taking into account all of your base stats before applying the 20% bonus. So what that means is, as a hypothetical example, let's say you have 15,000. Let's do a round number. Let's say you have 10,000 stamina, right, at base. So you have different sets that you're wearing that give you 10,000 stamina. Your CP tree, or sorry, not your CP, but your character points, your 64 character points are also into stamina, so you get to 10,000. Well, the CP tree, when you get to 300, it gives you 20%. So that means you would have 20% of 10,000, you would have 12,000. The problem is it wasn't applying the 5-piece bonuses, and I think it was food that also wasn't working. And so the base number was actually smaller than your actual number. So hypothetically, we'll make it an easy number for my sake. But let's say instead of 10,000, it's only calculating 5,000. So instead of getting a 2,000 bonus, you're only getting a 1,000 bonus. So in this next patch, I actually went and looked at it. If you go to the ESO build editor, you can look at the future patch, Wrathstone patch, and you can plug in your build, and you're going to get higher max stats. Even on my Stam Nightblade, I gained about 2,000 health and 2,000 stamina, and I wasn't running max Stam sets. So there's going to be a little bit of a power increase overall. Builds are going to be getting better. There's another video that I watched, and I can't remember his name right now. I'm really sorry. I'm having a really bad brain fart. But he posted an amazing video on Wood Elves and, how the recovery passive is a buff for most builds. I will post a link in the either in the description or in the comment section of his video, just so you guys can see it, because for those of you that are curious, it's really interesting. He does a really good job of diving in depth, but essentially all characters are getting these nice max stat buffs. And so this is the way it's supposed to be. Characters are getting a little bit more powerful in this way. So we'll move on from that. We could talk about that ad nauseum later, but I want to dive into this. Racial passives. Updated character creation screen to reflect the recent changes to racial passives in their lore text session. Wood Elf, Hunter's Eye. They changed this. So the three morphs were 20% movement speed, and then 10% movement speed and 1500 penetration for 4 seconds while roll dodging. They increased the duration to 6 seconds to 6 seconds from 4 seconds. So essentially, the pen on roll dodge is a cool idea, but it's only applicable to a few builds, very specific builds. The pen is a nice amount. I would still contend that 6 seconds is probably a little too short, especially for like a lot of different builds, but a lot of bow builds will utilize this. Most Stam Nightblades would be able to utilize this without having to make it gimmicky in general. 6 seconds isn't a bad duration. I would honestly prefer cutting the pen down to like 1000 or 900 and just giving it 100% uptime, because then PvE can utilize it, PvP can utilize it. It's not just bow Stam Nightblade builds that can use it. So yeah, it's still a good change. It's a change in the right direction. I'd like it to be a little bit more in the right direction, just my opinion. Imperial Red Diamond reworked the 5% block and bash cost reduction to 3% cost reduction of all abilities. All abilities, guys. That's really awesome. So they got that return. They got that, well, I think it turned out to 120 Stam and Magicka recovery. And then there's a health bonus, but in PvP it doesn't, the health bonus doesn't fucking matter. I'm not going to, like, yeah, it's like 50. So they got that little bit of recovery. They have good max Stam, they have good max health, but now 3% cost reduction, which is actually pretty nice. So now they have max stats, and now they have some cost reduction. So Imperials are a little bit more in line. Honestly, it's okay. I'll talk about it later. That's something for another rant in a little bit here. Khajiit, Feline Ambush, reworked the 8% spell and weapon critical strike chance to 10% critical damage and critical healing. I don't know how this change is going to work out in PvE. I think it's just all going to depend on what set you're wearing and all that. Maybe the meta changes a little bit for Khajiits. You know, you probably have to run 2 daggers like everybody else. I'm going to pay attention to the math guys when the math guys post this sort of stuff. But in PvP, this is pretty nice. 10% critical damage and healing. Critical damage is important. You know, there's a reason ganking Nightblades are very powerful. And it's the amount of crit damage they can stack. Khajiits have that again. So, once again, powerful class. You know, especially from a PvP perspective, they got... I think this is better. So, for PvP specifically. What else do we got here? And I'll dive into that. Okay. All right. So that was it for the PvP perspective of it. Wanted to dive a little bit into the racial passives for stamina for you guys that are curious on my thoughts on it. In general, you know, like they've changed over time. They don't have them written down all in full. But with the durations, like, you know, I think we all know, you know, what most of the passives are. We can just go to 4.1.1 really quick, and then 4.3.1.0, and then we can just go down to the racial passives. And so I can just kind of tell you what they are now that with all the changes. So we're just going to go through the Stam ones. So Argonian, they buffed this, so it's about 4,000 of each resource for the potion passive, on top of the 1,000 max Magicka. And then you gain your immune to the disease status effects still. They increased Life Mender, so instead of healing done by 4%, it's 6%. In general, Argonian's got a buff in a lot of ways. Like the max Magicka flat stat bonus puts them a lot closer to High Elves and Dark Elves than they were before. and Bretons. Instead of going from 3% to 10%, 3 times the amount of max stat bonuses, it's only half. So that's a pretty big change. Their potion passive wasn't really changed a whole lot. It went from 4620 to roughly 4,000 of each. That's not a big difference. And then instead of having 5% healing done and received for a total of 10% on yourself, it's 6%. So they didn't really change a whole lot there. Argonians are still going to be the sustaining all stat, gods that they are. They're still really good guys. They're still really good. Wood Elf, they're still really nice. Immune to poison status effect, 2,000 max stamina, which is fantastic. They also have big stamina recovery bonus. They're the only class in ESO that gets a stamina recovery bonus, and then 10% movement speed for 3 seconds. For 3 seconds, and then the roll dodge 1500 pen for 6 seconds. So Wood Elf is good. Wood Elf's in a pretty good spot. Dark Elf, we've looked at this. It's 1800-ish of each stat plus weapon and spell damage. Dark Elf is in an okay spot for a lot of builds. It's just for Stam, it's not. Imperial, obviously, we just went through that. They have 2,000 max health, 2,000 max Stam. They have the recovery from Red Diamond, and then they have the 3% reduced cost across the board, which is really cool. Khajiit has a little bit of everything. They buffed their recovery. I think they buffed their max health, magic, and stamina. Instead of weapon critical chance, it's weapon and spell critical damage, which is really good. Stamina recovery got a buff up to like 85. Obviously, also a good class. Nord's in a good spot. Orc is in a good spot. Anyway, in general, like most of the racial passes for Stam, racial passes in general are good. They're a lot better now after this week than they were last week. If we had a discussion this last week, I would have said Imperials are in a really bad spot. They're still but they're in a much better spot. The thing is what stands out when you look at the racial passives fully updated, Orc stands clearly above just about everybody else. Like I think it's pretty clear that regardless of build, Orc is going to be good. So if you run a bow build, and you use dodge roll, obviously Wood Elf is going to be great. Wood Elf would probably be best in slot for bow builds, but the next best in slot for bow builds is Orc. For just dishing out damage and being in your face in melee, Orc is right there. You get a big max health and max Stam bonus, and you also have weapon damage. You just have all these nice things going for you as an Orc. Sprint speed and cost reduction, like when they finally address movement speed, everything with Orc synergizes really well. It all works together to make a really good class. Now, am I saying Orc is overpowered? No, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is Orc has all these nice things. They have all these cool things. And then other classes like Redguard, although Redguard isn't in a bad spot, especially the snare reduction, like that's a really nice change. But some of these classes are really just missing their unique little niche, Like Wood Elf has this dodge roll passive that gives them pen. Orc has sprint speed, and they're like the brawler class, You have Breton, which are like this tanky, high sustain, like recovery Magicka class. Like everybody kind of has their thing. And then you get across Dark Elf, and Dark Elf's not bad, guys. Like Dark Elf, you get a good max Stam, you get good weapon damage. Dark Elf isn't going to be a bad stamina class, but why choose Dark Elf for literally any class for Stam outside of a hybrid when you can choose Orc? And the only argument you're going to hear from people is, well, Dark Elves are prettier than Orcs. So that's the only reason you choose it. Like, you're always going to choose the max health on a stamina build over the max Magicka, if the other stats are close to the same, which they are for those two. Redguard will have its place. It definitely will. Nord will definitely have its place. Like I said, it has its cool thing. You get max health. You get a decent amount of max stamina, and you get ulti-gen and physical and spell resistance for 4,000. Nord's in a really cool spot in that, you're going to have really good resistances even in medium on a Nord. You're going to be pretty tanky even in medium on a Nord, which is really cool. That's its cool thing. You're always just going to be pretty tanky. You're going to have good stat bonuses. 1,000 and 1,500 is no joke, So Nord is in a great spot. Khajiit right now is up there. Like, it really is. Like the magic and stamina recovery, people are going to be like, oh, it's only 85. It's not a whole lot. Trust me, when you're playing a few classes, having just that little bit, like 100 more stamina recovery or 150 more stamina recovery really does add up. Namely, like on a Stam Sorc, like getting that one extra dark deal in a fight really comes in handy. On a DK, having that extra, fragmented shield, extra thing of wings, like all this is good. Like flat recovery across the board, decent stats across the board, and then 8% more damage, 10% more damage when you crit. That's going to make you burstier. So every time you crit, you're going to do a little bit more damage. There's going to be some really interesting builds out with Khajiits. That's what I'm going to say. And I'm going to make a couple of them. I promise you that. And they're going to be good. Like, it's really cool. Khajiit's going to have its niche basically anywhere. Like, good class guys. Really good race. Imperial now has a spot. I would have preferred if they did... they made them like max stat gods. Like, get rid of the 3% cost reduction. Just say, you know what? Max stam, max health, max magicka. Give them 2,000 of everything. Because Imperials are supposed to be well balanced. They're supposed to be the jack of all trades. They're supposed to be able to do everything. The thing is like if you do 2,000 of each max stat, there's no... Imperial's not going to beat anything out in PvE if you do that. In PvP, it's going to be really good for tankiness. It's going to put it in line with a couple other classes. But as it stands right now, before the 3% cost reduction, you weren't going to choose Imperial over like an Argonian or a Nord if you were tanking. That just wasn't going to happen. And so this cost reduction really comes in handy. It's going to be really good. 3% is... that's what Bretons have right now, if I remember correctly. It's really good. So Imperial's in a good spot, guys. Like, they're going to have good max stats. They're going to have decent little recovery. That's going to really put them in line. They don't really have like their niche thing. At least their niche thing's not block and bash anymore. Cost reduction's better for everything, which is pretty cool. Imperial is something to consider. Like I said, Dark Elf's just missing something, man. It's just missing something. It really sucks because there's a lot of Dark Elves out there, and you're basically telling them like be a hybrid or race change. Because, yeah, they're not bad, but, like, in PvP, in your Stam, you're going to go Orc. Like, sorry, I'm going to take that. For a Magicka class, Dark Elf is still very good. Because you still need that stamina pool to be able to block cast, to be able to CC break and all of that. So, for a Magicka class, Dark Elf is still solid. But for a Stamina class, Dark Elf is compared to Orc. So, that's where the difference is, and that's where, like, makes you think, like, okay, well, maybe... Or Orc's just a little bit ahead of everybody else. That's why maybe we need to address these other ones. Wood Elf is going to be best in slot for bow. That's just the way it is, in my opinion. Like, you get good max stats, you get good stamina recovery, and you get pen. Like, it just has a little bit of everything. And you get the movement speed, and Argonian's still going to be what Argonian is. So everything's kind of in line. And so now it's like you're starting to see things come together for these racial passives to where the racial passives now kind of drive what build you want to run. And so it's like, okay, well, as an example, I watched Fang Rush's video on the 4.3.2 patch notes, and he's talking about Redguard, and he's like, as an example, guys, and he's like, yeah, he goes, at 15 snare reduction, he goes, you're not even going to feel it. He said, you're not going to notice it. And he's absolutely right. 15% you're not going to notice. But you stack 15% with the 15% from a Warden and the 50% you get from Barkskin or Ranger's Gate, and you have 80% snare reduction on a Redguard. So you have good max stats. You have 80% snare reduction with a specific build. Like, so that means a 5-second snare literally lasts 1 second. It hits you, it's gone, and you're able to move again. 80% is a shit ton. I put bark skin on my Warden recently, and that's 65. 50% is a lot. 65 is awesome. 80% is going to be amazing, guys. Trust me on this. Like, Redguard's going to have a spot, especially on Wardens. Like, ball groups, I know a lot of people are looking at Nords, and they absolutely should be. I know a lot of people are looking at Orcs, and they absolutely should be. But if you want to move, you got to look at, I think you got to look at Redguard. I think Redguard's in a great spot for that specific niche. Wood Elf's in a great spot for bow builds. Orcs that up front in your face, and Nord's the same way. And so is Imperial. They all have these in your face abilities that they can function in different ways. So it's really cool. And so you get to kind of choose what you prefer. Argonian, obviously, they just they just have stats. Like, you pop a potion, you get everything. So in general, right now, after these changes, they're all pretty good. Like, it's all going to come down to your specific build, your specific playstyle, and what you kind of prefer to shore up your weaknesses for which racial passive is the best, except for Dark Elf. For stamina, except for Dark Elf. So, once again, ZeniMax, I know you're not watching this, but if you are, please do something for our Dark Elves. Please, like give them a little something. Like, they have nice max stats, they have nice weapon damage, but, like, that's what Orcs have. Orcs have nice max stats. Orcs have weapon damage, but Orcs also have PvP passives. Wood Elves have the same thing. Give Dark Elf a little something. Give them something PvP related, Not reduce the cost of block and bash. So, that's going to be the end of this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment in the section below if you disagree with me. Please tell me why. Love to hear it. Love to have a discussion, because maybe I'm missing something. But in general, I kind of like where they're going. And then obviously I'll create a video for Magicka classes as well, but I don't want to ramble on too much longer. So, thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice day.